What is going on, everybody? It is Dylan with Astrodfs bringing you a brand new video. Today's video going over Week 10's wide receivers and tight ends to target. So this is Sunday morning, so not all the news is official yet, but just going based off of what we've seen. So if you look at the top right, you can see the keys that I have my spreadsheet at. Green is cash, yellow viable, stackable, with quarterbacks. Orange is value, purple, bluish is tournament, and then teal is smash plays, and those are available for subscribers. Those will be going live in just a little bit. So let's get into it. Keenan Allen, tournament played 8,800. Highest total on the slate, right? Second on the team in red zone targets. It's a good matchup for him. I don't really like any other Chargers receivers, tight ends. As of right now, I probably won't going up to the slate. It's Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, my only two. You could put Herbert in there too, but I really don't like Herbert, especially for his price. But it's same thing for Keenan Allen too. His price is up there at 8,800. You're paying a pretty penny, especially if you're doing a run back. Amon-Ra's 83, so you're paying more for Keenan Allen than you are the wide receiver on the team you're betting on if you're playing the Detroit side. But yeah, I'm not really sold. Jamar Chase, if active, I have as a cash play. It might go out. It's looking like it'll probably go out. Ian Rappaport tweeted saying there's a 50-50 shot if he plays or not today, so that'll be something to watch for. If he does play, I like a lot of it. It'll probably be lower for my cash options. Probably lean towards CD and Amon-Ra than Chase and cash. But I think if you're doing a bunch of tournament lines, to definitely have exposure to Chase. CD Lamb, though, 8,500 against the Giants. One of the best receivers in the league versus man coverage this year, and the Giants were in a lot of man. Second on the team in red zone targets behind Ferguson. And Adoree Jackson is out for the Giants, which is a huge miss for them. He's their best corner by far, so not really anybody on paper, statistically looking at stuff, that should be able to slow CeeDee Lamb down. So great matchup. Game script fits them. I think they're at 17.5. They're at 16 when I got them, so a point and a half at what they're at, right? It's not like a point and a half going from like 3 to 4.5. They're a point and a half going from 16 to 17.5. That is a crazy number. But right below him, Amon-Ra St. Brown, probably one of my favorite wide receiver plays on the slate. Granted, that usually backfires every time I say it, so we'll see where that goes. 8,300 against the Chargers. 26% of the red zone targets for Amon-Ra, kind of up there with Laporta. Amazing matchup against the Chargers secondary, who is very bad. Highest total on the slate, and a good run back piece if you're playing the Chargers side. Mike Evans is a tournament play for me, 7,200. It's very unsure. I think both Evans and Chris Godwin have scenarios to where they both have really good games. One obviously is going to outscore the other one, which is just history of Evans and Godwin. If you want to play the value-wise and go 500 less for Godwin and just hope that he scores, 3 or less points, something like that, go for it. But I do prefer Evans over Godwin. Second on the team in red zone targets behind Chris Godwin. Great matchup for him personally. And both their stats, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, pretty similar there. Brandon Ayuk I have as a stackable piece at 7,100 against Jacksonville. Weather might affect that game a little bit, but I doubt it. Both San Francisco receivers, Debo and Brandon Ayuk, both good matchups. Similar numbers, similar matchup grades as far as like versus man, versus zone. A lot of them similar. Debo is just $900 cheaper. DK Metcalf I have as a cash play at 6,800 going against Washington. Great matchup. 34% of the red zone targets go to him. Slightly better versus man than Tyler Lockett, and I do use that word slightly as slightly if you go and look at the numbers. It's not an outrageous difference. And granted, in this one, Tyler Lockett is 6,100 compared to DK, so another $700 difference, right? A difference in two really good receivers with good matchups, good game script, similar numbers. But Chris Godwin mentioned 34.3% of the red zone targets go to him, so he's getting a lot of that red zone work. Mike Evans has been eating a lot of the outside the red zone work, between the 20s, so do with that information as you will. But yeah, similar stats. Mike Evans pretty much. So both those guys, if you want to save 500 and have a good play, Chris Godwin, I don't know. I've lost bets on betting Godwin over Evans, so just gonna stay true to that. Amari Cooper is the next wide receiver I have 6,300 against Baltimore. He's the only Browns wide receiver, pretty much the only Browns player I have worth taking on this slate. Not even Deshaun Watson, not Ford, not Hunt, not Njoku. None of the values for Cleveland wide receivers, none. Because Baltimore's defense is really good. Plays okay versus man in 22% of the red zone targets, which is number 2 behind Njoku. So, tournament play, if Cleveland's going to succeed, Amari Cooper's probably a guy that's going to help them succeed. Deebo Samuel 6,200 against Jacksonville. Almost like the same exact stuff pretty much as Brandon Ayuk. There's not much of a difference except their price. Tyler Lockett, 6,100 against Washington. Same thing as Deebo, great matchup. Not Deebo, DK. DK getting 34% of the red zone targets. Right behind him is Tyler Lockett getting 23.7. That's still a really good number for a wide receiver too. I think most people would go 1A, 1B pretty much. I don't know where I was. Sorry. Cheaper for the same game script as DK. So basically what that means is a lot of the numbers are the same. Like I said, DK slightly better versus man, which Washington runs more man than zone. I'm okay if you play Tyler Lockett, right? Obviously, you could do a double stack with them. I don't think that's a bad thing today. Facing a Washington secondary that's very bad, traded away their edge rushers, all that. They played New England. Not a really good offense. Now, granted, Seattle's offense hasn't looked as good, especially in the pass game. Their numbers aren't as great as they should be with the talent they have, but I really like Seattle today. DeAndre Hopkins, another cash play at 6,000. I think this one's pretty obvious, especially if you like a Baker stack. A good run back for that is DeAndre Hopkins, right? If you want a Baker, Evans, Baker, Godwin, stack Evans and Godwin, whatever you want to do, DeAndre Hopkins is a great piece. Even if you're not stacking that game at all, which I'm not, but DeAndre Hopkins 6,000, right? Putting up some really good numbers, especially as of late. 37% of the red zone targets. 17 targets in the last 2 games with Will Levis. Great matchup, and Treylon Burks is out, which sometimes hurts wide receivers, sometimes helps. So DeAndre Hopkins 6K, willing to take that risk on him again in this matchup. Jordan Addison, a tournament play for me, 5,900 against New Orleans. Obviously, Josh Dobbs is quarterback. Don't know entirely what that offense looks like with him as the quarterback versus Kirk. Leads team on red zone targets. He's tied with Alexander Mattison, but as far as pass catchers, he leads the team. It's a good matchup against the Saints. Not great. It's not anything that really blows you away, but it is a good matchup. Terry McLaurin, 5,800. Could move to cash. We'll see what it looks like. Good versus zone, which is what Seattle runs. More zone than man, pretty much. An okay matchup against Seattle. I'm hoping that defense clicks. I really like Seattle's secondary. I think their defense is really good. But we'll go down here. Terry McLaurin, mentioned 58. Calvin Ridley, 56 against San Fran. I have as a stackable option, right? You go up. I don't have much on Christian Kirk. I'd rather play Ridley, in all honesty, today. But Ridley, 5,600. Don't love the matchup, but prefer Ridley over Kirk this week. San Fran has holes in their defense, especially in the pass game, but they're coming off a bye. Their offense is getting healthy. Trent Williams may or may not play. They add Chase Young to that defensive line. Jacksonville's offensive line hasn't been bad. There is easily scenarios where Calvin Ridley or Christian Kirk, for that matter, right? Christian Kirk has been statistically the better wide receiver, right? Even game film wise, the better wide receiver. But I just prefer Ridley over Kirk in this matchup, especially a cheaper price. Tank Dell, I have a stackable. A lot of people have him in cash. I'm fine with that. Don't have a problem with it. Nico Collins is already out. There's a lot of people out for the Texans offense, which is why I have Tank Dell as a stackable player, not a cash. I probably have scenarios where I have him in a cash line. We'll see what that looks like. There's some other pieces I like for a little bit cheaper, though. He is a good run back piece if you're targeting that Cincinnati offense, if you're targeting Burrow, Chase, Tankdale 5,500. That's a huge save for the number one wide receiver on Houston. Robert Woods is going to be back. Noah Brown had a good game. Dalton Schultz is still there. Singletary was the starting running back last week, so a lot of similarities there, just top to bottom on the team. Kicker, linebacker, offensive lineman. There's injuries kind of all over the place, so could easily see some stuff going south unexpectedly for Houston just because of the different personnel, but we'll at the end, that might not affect this Houston team. That might not affect CJ Stroud, who is putting in MVP type performance so far for a team that wasn't supposed to win any games this season based off of their talent. But Drake London, same price, 5,500 against Arizona. 33% of the red zone targets have been to Drake London. It's a great matchup. Best receiver on the team versus zone. 6th most yards to wide receivers Arizona's allowed. So, the biggest concern that everyone has with Atlanta is you don't know what Arthur Smith's going to do. He's going to have his 3rd string tight end throw to his 2nd string tight end, who's going to pitch it to their 4th string running back. It's complicated trying to break that team down. They have so much talent, it's being misused. Like they've won games. Their defense is really good, but it's just hard to explain that team to somebody if you try to explain to them the talent, the 3 first-round skilled position players they have back-to-back top 10 picks, and they're not being used the way they should be. But they've won games. But we'll go down to Deontay Johnson at 5,400 for me. I have as a cash play. Great matchup. 3rd on the team in red zone targets, and you got to remember he's been hurt. And Pat Freiermuth is one of those guys, so George Pickens leads the team. Deontay Johnson now fits in number 2. The points, his fantasy points, his DK points have went up 12 to 16 to 22, and he's still cheap, right? He's a target monster. We saw last year with Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky. Green Bay, you might think, hey, like, Green Bay's got a good secondary. Jair is not playing as far as I know. Him and Quay Walker, I think are both out. I know Alexander is out, if I can remember everything. Quay Walker was truly questionable as well. Both those guys are out. Those are huge losses for Green Bay's defense. Granted, Pittsburgh offense is very bad. Very, very, very bad. And they have pieces on that offense, right? Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, a good 1-2. Najee Harris and Warren, a good 1-2 as well there. Once Freiermuth gets back, good tight end. I think their offensive line is improved, but the play calling is just terrible there. Romeo Doubs, tournament play for me. If I'm playing a run back piece or, a cheaper wide receiver in that 5K range, probably with lower ownership, playing Romeo Doubs. Best on the team versus man coverage. 30% of the red zone target sets, even with Christian Watson coming back, and the best matchup out of all Green Bay receivers. He's going to see a little more Joey Porter than anybody else, I do believe, but getting outside Joey Porter, Romeo Doubs should have success. Marquise Brown, another cash play. I think a lot of people have him as a cash play too. Getting Kyler Murray back is that reason. 30% of the red zone targets, though, going to Marquise Brown. Obviously gets the upgrade between Doubs tuned to Kyler Murray. 11 receiving touchdowns to wide receivers Atlanta's allowed this year, which is crazy. In an okay matchup, right? You look at Atlanta's corners, really good corners there, but that doesn't mean a speedster like Marquise Brown, who Kyler's familiar with, have success. So, and it's also a very cheap stack. Kyler, I believe, 5,900, so you're paying 11.2 for a Kyler Marquise Brown stack. That's amazing. Jahan Dotson, a value play at 5K, okay versus zone. Curtis Samuel is expected back, leads team in red zone targets. Prefer Terry McLaurin in this matchup, but he's still playable. Tyler Boyd I have as a value. I think he turns into cash if Chase is, if we hear more about the injury that either one Chase is not playing, then you get Chase and Higgins out. Obviously, a lot of people are going to go to Boyd, but still, even if Chase is in, I still think he becomes a really good value play. but we'll see what that looks like once we get closer to the game. JSN, a value for me at 4,100. Not really any numbers going off of it. Just a price point, lower ownership than both Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Putting up some good points lately. Not all the games, but some of the games he's had some good points, so we'll see where that leads today. The matchup's good for him as well. Wan'Dale Robinson, a value going against Dallas. He's pretty much the only person on Giants I want any type of exposure to. Lining up in the slot, really good matchup there. So Wan'Dale, 3,700, I think is a good value piece for what he has done. Michael Wilson, 3,500 against Atlanta. Yet again, all Arizona players, I have the same thing. Better quarterback play. Best, even though I can't spell, best wide receiver versus zone on the team. Good value with lower ownership. Tough matchup. So, Michael Wilson, guy that can get you 5 to 10 points, gets you 10 points at 3,500. That really does open up a lot for the possibilities of your line. Jameson Williams, a value for me, right? At 3,400, obviously they get David Montgomery back, so that helps the run game. That really helps the red zone game. But 24% of routes he runs, he gets a target. That is a high number for a guy that's 3,400. The problem is he doesn't run a lot of routes. So if he can get some routes in this game and the Chargers allow a lot of explosive plays in the pass game, Jameson Williams is one of those guys that opens that up. So I really like his price point. Going to get exposure to him at 3,400. And then last but not least for wide receivers, Nelson Aguilar, 3,000. Just trust me. Only Baltimore wide receiver with positives versus man. Don't love the play. Small upside, but at 3,000, he gets you that touchdown. And we'll say a 10-yard touchdown, he gets you 8 points at 3,000. Sure. Right, I'm not going to blow up the slate, but allows you to get some of the running backs and wide receivers on the slate. So let's go to tight ends now. Sam Laporta, stackable. If you want him in cash, go for it. I'm fine with him being a cash play. I expect him to be a cash play, not super huge, but I don't have any problem with it. I just have a stackable with Jared Goff just because of their price points. I think it's a fair stack. If you, for some reason, want to fade Amon-Ra or want to have a double stack, you're paying a lot, but they are there. Third most receiving yards to tight ends the Chargers have allowed. Laporta getting 26.1% of the red zone targets, tied with Amon-Ra, and a top 10 PFF tight end advantage today. So that's 5,700, so you are paying up a tight end, and I don't love the price, which is why I have him at stackable, because if you're playing Laporta, that means you're taking off one of those mid-price wide receivers, and there's a lot of good plays today. T.J. Hockenson at 5,000 going against New Orleans. 12 targets with Dobbs last week. 25% of his routes he gets a target. New Orleans, 5 touchdowns to tight ends. So T.J. Hockenson is a cash play for me. Kind of the safest play for Minnesota. We all know what Dobbs is able to do for Ertz and McBride. If you combine their points and stuff like that, they were a good play. Unfortunately, you can't. You can only do one or the other. Dalton Schultz, tournament play, though, at 4,900. Top 10 PFF tight end advantage. 34.5% of the red zone targets. Nico Collins out. Dalton Schultz good against a team that allows the most DraftKings points at tight ends. Dalton Schultz. Jake Ferguson, 4,600 against the Giants as a cash play. The best PFF tight end advantage. 28.3% of the red zone targets. And 17.5 favorites, which means they expect Dallas to score. I think they're at 30 for the team total. So Jake Ferguson getting 3 out of every 10 red zone targets in a game like this, I'll take. Trey McBride, though, 3,500, I think is the tight end most people will go today. We'll see what that ownership looks like. Third most receiving yards to tight ends Atlanta is allowed. Upgrade at quarterback. Saw what he was able to do the other week in garbage time and get 25 DraftKings points, so 3,500. Zach Ertz still out. Kyler being in. James Conner expected in, too. That's a huge plus. And then last but not least, for tight ends, my thing with tight ends is get exposure to almost every tight end, right? Tight ends are so random. Last week it worked out. If you played a bunch of random tight ends, you probably had some good lines. If you overcommitted on one, you might have missed another, like Dalton Schultz. I had decent amount of exposure to Dalton Schultz. Not a lot, but 5% when the field was somewhere around 3. I'll take it. Irv Smith, though, getting to it. Irv Smith, 2,700 against Houston. Houston giving up a lot of points to tight ends as well, just below the team they're facing. Could be great value if Chase and Higgins both out. Obviously, we know Higgins is out, but it's saying if Chase is out as well. Houston's allowed 4 touchdowns to tight end, so this could be a really good opportunity for Irv Smith at a cheap 2,700 price point. So if you wanted to pay up for Dallas's defense, I don't have defenses anymore. I don't feel they're worth really putting a sheet out for. Defenses are random. But if you were to play Dallas's defense, which is 4,400, something like that, Irv Smith is basically the defense then. If you wanted to go that route and just put it in perspective, 2,700 for a defense, and Dallas is 4,400, so a mid-price tight end. That makes sense. That's perfect. That's okay. And then what do you need out of Irv Smith? What do you want out of your defense? 5 points? You hope they stay somewhere around 5 points. Anything more you're happy with, but you don't really care. It's a defense. So Irv Smith's the last one. So I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you guys want these spreadsheets with my updated smash plays, please click the link in the description. It will take you to our Discord. You can find our subscription packages. Like I said, very cheap. So check that out. I will see you guys in the next one.